Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. It was another day of voluntary OTAs out in Berea. Browns allowing the media to take a look at it. Disclaimer here, you can't tell a lot about what's going on. The Browns are in shorts and helmets. Having said that, let's take a look at some of the things going on. And Shedeur Sanders looked pretty good. Sanders finds Deontay Johnson on that pass. Dillon Gabriel looked okay too. Dillon Gabriel finds Harold Fannin, another rookie, underneath. Joe Flacco, little read option, throws it, and he finds Cade McDonald. Kenny Pickett, we're going to get all the quarterbacks in here. Kenny Pickett's turn here, throwing the football, and he'll go outside to Pierre Strong. Turns it upfield. Of course, Jerry Jeudy got some work in as well. A really nice move off the line of scrimmage. Again, OTAs. Not going to read too much into it. Mandatory minicamp up next week, where the veterans will have to be there, expected to be there, and we'll see what goes on. That's the next opportunity for the media to be out there. It'll be next week for a couple of days consecutively. Browns play-by-play voice, Andrew Siciliano, with his perception of the way people are talking about the Browns quarterback competition at this point of the season.
I was there for rookie minicamp. I saw both days of practice. I stood on the field and watched Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders throw the football. They both had really good moments. We're like, all right, I see it. There it is. And they both had moments where like, yeah, they're rookies. Perfect example. Shedeur's very first snap, his very first day at rookie minicamp, he bobbled it coming away from center because, hey, you're under center. That's different for most college quarterbacks making the transition. And then with the rush getting to him because he was late getting away from the line, he backpedaled, and then kind of like lofted it like 15 yards down, like to the sideline. And if that were a game, you were like, oh my God, it would have been like a disaster pit. Like,
sure.
And you're like, oh my God. But that was the very first play. From that point on, he looked great. And then he was throwing touchdowns. He was throwing back shoulders to local kids who ended up getting signed on the spot because they were tryout players. So all of the above is true. Both he and Dillon Gabriel had good moments, and they had rookie moments. Also true, both of them have been exemplary in the building and on the podium.
Again, can't read too much to what's going on now. Everything goes into the factoring of it. We'll hear a little bit about how the coaches grade things at this point of the year a little bit later in the show. Tommy Rees, one of those coaches, talking about Quishon Junkins, Dylan Sampson, and Harold Fannin, the three rookies that the Browns drafted.
Yeah, really done a nice job for us. I mean, Quishon and Dylan, being multiple in what we've asked them to do. You guys saw a little bit of that today with those guys out there. And, both strong running traits and, some versatility to do some different things. But they've great attitude, have worked extremely hard, have picked it up, have bought into what, Deuce has asked them to do and what we've asked them to do offensively, and, really done a nice job picking things up. And, Harold has really gravitated to that room of tight ends. CJ's done an excellent job making sure that, we're getting him ready to go. And, he's made some plays throughout camp for us and continue to expect him to do so and continue to push to find ways to get him involved.
Well, for the last few years, Browns have been trying to figure out a way. How do we bookend Myles Garrett? Let's find another guy on the end that you put out there, so you got to decide who do you not block. Well, a little different this year. They draft Mason Graham, and they're going to play him next to him in all likelihood. Graham, 5th overall pick. Defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz on how Mason Graham lining up next to Myles Garrett can help him rush to the passer.
There's a lot of different ways you can look at that, but, Myles sees a lot of double-team chips. But a thing that goes a little bit unnoticed is he sees so much center slide too, which lets the tackle overset him because the guard is there to play all the inside moves. So, in essence, a lot of times you can be triple-teamed on those plays. And the best way to combat that is have a pass rusher that's on the opposite side that can make offenses pay for singling up a defensive tackle on a guard. And like I said, in my history, I've had a lot of guys that can do that. Most recently, guys like Fletcher Cox in Philadelphia that could do that. So, and you're closer to the quarterback when you're a tackle. But there's only a few ways you can really combat a defensive tackle, and one of those is the center slide, and the centers always slide into mouths. That provides a lot of opportunities for a player there, and we have to take advantage. We have to take better advantage of those situations than we did last year.
We'll hear more from Jim Schwartz talking about Myles Garrett as well as Mason Grant coming up a little bit later in the show. Let's turn our attention to the Guardians. Opened up 3-game series against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium last night in New York, and it was a pretty good game, well pitched. 5th inning, DJ LeMahieu, and he hits one out into right field, and that brings in the first run of the game, 1-0 Yankees. 7th inning, David Fry gets a big base hit out into right field. RBI single ties the game up at 1. Tanner Bibee goes back out, having thrown over 90 pitches, and finds the middle of the plate, and Jazz Chisholm gets just enough of it that it goes into the seats and right, 2-1. Still in that 7th inning, Tanner Bibee hangs a slider, and Anthony Volpe hops on it. 3-1, Yankees take the lead. Guardians don't go down without a fight. Daniel Schneemann, base hit out into right field. It's an RBI single, 3-2 the score. 9th inning, tying run on at second, and Bo Naylor flies out to left field to end the ballgame. 3-2. Yankees win it. Stephen Vogt talked about Tanner Bibee, who pitched pretty well, pitched into the 7th inning and probably deserved a little bit better than he got last night.
Keeping his pitch count low, getting weak contact, a lot of punch outs tonight. His outing was much better than his line ended up being. He gave up the 2 homers there at the end, but he was some kind of special tonight. He was cruising. This is one of his best outings of the year. So Tanner had looked good up until that point, so not even a thought to not send him back out. The fastball to Jazz just was right down the middle, and then he hung the slider to Volpe. So kind of his only 2 mistakes of the night, and they didn't miss him. David's such a big part of our team. I mean, just in that situation, he's trying to hit a ball to right field, and he gets a pitch to do it on, and he gets a base hit. He's a really good baseball player. We're really happy to have him back. I thought the changeup was especially good tonight. He wasn't really throwing off speed in the zone. He was keeping the slider back door, getting some calls out there. But he pitched outstanding. I mean, what was that, 14, 15 in a row at one point? So he's had our number, but he's a big-time pitcher. That's what those guys are paid to do, and he showed up and did his job.
Talking about Carlos Rodon there, who actually retired 17 Guardians in a row at one point in time. Bobby went toe-to-toe with him, so that's the good sign. Bad sign is they lost 3-2. Same 2 teams tonight, Yankee Stadium. It'll be Luis Ortiz against Clark Schmidt for the Yankees. Some news from the NBA. Phoenix Suns are hiring former Cavaliers assistant coach Jordan Ott as their new head coach. Ott has been an NBA assistant since 2012. Strong background of offense and defensive creativity, player development, and communication was part of Kenny Atkinson's staff this season. He is headed to be the head coach of the Phoenix Suns. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Browns are up first. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com straight ahead. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Shedeur Sanders out at mini camp today. This one right behind him. Completion to Harold Fannin. A couple of rookies hooking up as OTAs underway in Berea. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. Kimberly Martin, ESPN's Get Up, on Shedeur Sanders and his chances of landing the starting quarterback job with the Browns.
In that building, there are people who believe Fedor can 100% be the starter of this football team. You said it's incumbent upon the Browns to put him in a situation. It's also incumbent upon Fedor to do the work, which talking to people in that building, they have said he is soaking up everything like a sponge in the QB rooms, talking to Flacco, wanting to learn. And also, let's not forget, Dylan Gabriel. We spent a lot of time talking about Fedor, but Dylan Gabriel is a guy who was drafted in the 3rd. One source said to me, he is everything you want in a quarterback. He's just small. If he were a little taller, a lot of people would be looking at Dylan Gabriel a little differently. At least that's how they feel in their building.
Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim is a 5'9" guy. I get it. If you're Dylan Gabriel, you're used to being the size you are, and you want to compete. You can't tell at this point if his size is a detriment. You won't be able to tell, I don't think, probably until preseason, maybe some of the joint practices.
Yeah, that's really going to be the first gauge of it. Maybe even as soon as when we see the pads come on at practice, that might be the first time you can really look at it and get a gauge for, what kind of size limitations that a guy like Dylan Gabriel could have. I mean, Kevin Stefanski basically said, I think the Browns basically said, when they drafted him, that the size didn't show up on film. And in a lot of ways you could see that based on the way he plays. But the NFL is just a different animal, obviously. And there's so much of a bigger challenge on those shorter quarterbacks with Dylan Gabriel. And going back to what, Kimberly Martin was saying about Fedor, it seems like he's done and said all the right things ever since he got drafted. I felt like, I personally believe that he's got first round talent, no question about it. But him starting, I wouldn't be stunned if he starts at some point this season. I just don't think it's going to be week 1, just because when you look at the schedule that the Browns have this season, when you can make an argument that going to Pittsburgh is one of the easiest games in that 6-game schedule, I mean, that tells you just what kind of gauntlet it is for any quarterback. And you can 100% understand the reasoning with the veteran winning there. That would, I don't know if that would handicap the competition more towards the veterans, just the start of the season, but it certainly doesn't help Fedor's case to win the starting job if he plays well enough over these next couple of months. Yeah,
Kevin Stefanski is going to play who he thinks gives them the best chance to win for the foreseeable beginning of the schedule. And we'll go from there. Tommy Rees, offensive coordinator, the new offensive coordinator, talked about what the coaches are paying close attention to with the quarterbacks at this time of year.
I think for all the position groups, quarterbacks especially, we want to be as process-driven as possible, opposed to results. As long as our process is in the right place, our decision-making is in the right place, we'll continue to coach the fundamentals and get the physical to follow it. But we want to focus on, okay, is he processing at the high level? Is he making the right decisions? Is he making the right reads? And as that happens, now you see growth and continue to push him fundamentally to make sure that we're executing.
That's why percentage of completions, those things don't matter at this point in time, because what they're doing is not what he's going to see when it does matter.
Yeah, and what Tommy Rees was saying about decision making, that's obviously something we talked about most of the offseason, that when they were going to look for a quarterback, that decision making was one of the things I believe Tommy Rees pointed out way back in the beginning of the offseason as something they would look at. And I think what he said there is really kind of the modern way of doing things in sports in a nutshell. Process over results. You can have great results, but your process can be terrible. And you can also have a really good process, and then the results just aren't there. One doesn't necessarily, a good process doesn't necessarily guarantee good results, but it gives you a better chance to get to those good results. And I think in 2024, obviously there were very bad results. Process, I think, obviously seems like it's been tweaked a lot. So getting those quarterbacks to understand that process, if you have a good process, you should have a better chance, obviously, to yield those kind of results. And it feels like that's what Tommy Rees is pushing for with the quarterbacks.
Come September, results are important, but until then, we'll defer things. Here's another one, though. Deontay Johnson was not at OTAs again. Greg Newsome was there. I'm curious. We don't know the reason for Deontay Johnson's absence at OTAs. If there's a family thing, a personal thing, that's one thing. If not, that's not a great look for a guy that has a real opportunity here to potentially rejuvenate his career.
Yeah, and especially after the last couple seasons really having, gone well for Deontay Johnson. Started really well in Pittsburgh, but the last couple of years, really hasn't gone well. He bounced around multiple spots, in 2024. Now, certainly, obviously, you don't want to, diminish why a guy's not there at OTAs. You certainly don't want to punish guys because, again, these are voluntary practices they're having, and an organization I don't think can really hold it against somebody if they're not there at OTAs, but it couldn't hurt, if unless there's a legitimate reason Deontay Johnson's not there. I mean, it couldn't hurt to try and, curry a little favor, trying to establish some chemistry with the quarterbacks, especially if you recognize that this may be your last real shot of, turning your career around and having success. So, I mean, we may never know why he's just not at OTAs, but hopefully for him, he gets the mandatory minicamp next week and, shows the talent that he showed early in his career with the Steelers. I mean, that would be the best case scenario, obviously, for him and the Browns, is to get into camp, to minicamp, training camp, and look like that guy we saw in his first couple of seasons in the NFL.
So this one's from CBSSports.com. Projections for the top running backs in the 2025 draft class. Quinshon Judkins, they say 203 carries, almost 4 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns. And I looked at that and I was like, yeah, it's almost 4 yards a carry. I think the offense is going to lean on him a little bit more than that. I think they need him to do a little bit more. Just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what he was drafted for, to be a workhorse running back. You saw that all 3 years of his career, his first 2 at Ole Miss, and even at Ohio State. I know Ohio State had that tandem with Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, but Judkins felt more like the workhorse of that backfield, and obviously getting so much of the load those first 2 seasons at Ole Miss, so he has that experience doing that. What I think is, obviously, you draft him 36th overall to be that number 1 running back potentially as early as day number 1 of the regular season. So you would imagine that he could play very well. Obviously, if he's sub 4 yards a carry, that'd be a little, difficult, especially if the Browns are trying to go back to the scheme that Kevin Stefanski had in the past that really prioritized the run. You'd like to see that up a little bit more. Certainly some of those carries could go, I think, to Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford if you're trying to really create a running tandem, which I think the Browns should certainly have, but I wouldn't be stunned if Quinshon Judkins, by the end of the season, when he's healthy, leads the Browns in carries. It's just kind of the nature of runner he is. He seems like a guy who's built for that massive workload.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention to the defense here, a little bit from Jim Schwartz as well. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
OTAs out in Berea. We're going to turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball. Line going through some drills at organized team activities. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, met with the media today. Talked about what his expectations for Myles Garrett are after signing that big contract in the offseason.
I really think Myles is going to have the best season of his career. And has to, right? I mean, I've told him before, what's that Spider-Man quote? With great power comes great responsibility, right? And that's with the big contract, with the notoriety that came along with that, and with the process that took to get him to that point. There also comes, there's always pressure in this league, but probably a little bit more so. And I think that brings out the best in players. And I know that'll be the case with Myles also.
So, Tim, Myles wasn't at OTAs. Again, I've said this. I have no problem with that whatsoever. He's never come into camp out of shape. expectations for him and just your thoughts about a defensive lineman not going to OTAs when there's no pads, you're in helmets and shorts, and not a lot gets done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that's that much of a big deal. I know, Jimmy Haslam was talking about, how he kind of wants Myles Garrett to be more of a leader. And I mean, again, you're not going to gain much from, OTAs as a defensive lineman, especially when you're in the same scheme for the third year in a row. There's really not much Myles Garrett can gain out of these couple weeks. And I feel like, once training camp gets rolling around, once week one gets in and say he gets a sack on Joe Burrow in the first half of that game, no one's going to remember that Myles Garrett was not at OTAs. For him, it's obviously what he gets done in the games, and the fact that, he was Defensive Player of the Year in 2023. He had a legitimate case to get votes in 2024, even though the Browns were as bad as they were at 3-14. Tells you the level that Myles Garrett's at. He doesn't even turn 30 until the end of December, so he's got some really good years still left in him. He's been so productive. I think if you're the Browns, you can certainly trust in him that he's going to do the things he needs to do to keep his body right and to get ready for the season in the way he has, because the things he's done the last few years have certainly worked at an extremely high level.
So the question becomes, how do the Browns get back to the defense they had a couple of years ago when they were really good, among the top 5 in the NFL? That was asked of Jim Schwartz earlier today.
Things that end drives. Third down percentage had dropped from number 1 from the year before. And then takeaways. Both of those things obviously end drives. We're trying to get off the field with no points allowed. And those are the things that we're putting a big emphasis on this year. We emphasized them last year, but those are areas that we have to improve.
So how do you do that, though, is the question?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things. Turnovers go a lot of different ways. We work a lot of different techniques for turnovers. A lot of turnovers are because of rush on the quarterback, and we got to improve there from last year. Get our rush percentage up. Being around the quarterback is a good formula for takeaway. Team speed is is a good formula for taking the ball away, and physical contact, which we're not working on right now, but guys that play physical nature of football, they have a habit of forcing turnovers.
And Tim, if you look at it, they went out and got a linebacker, Schlesinger, physical. That was their second overall pick. They got a physical guy to play defensive tackle in Mason Graham. So the top 2 picks in the draft kind of tell you that's what they thought they needed on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no question about it. Just that I think that physical edge is something every defense could always use. And, with Mason Graham drafting 5th overall, they got the guy who certainly was the best player, I think, available at that time, and a guy who could be a true game wrecker in the middle. Obviously, with Graham's just unique ability, putting him next to Myles Garrett, you would hope that the two of them can really, that Graham can really tap into the attention defenses are giving Myles early on in the season, and then really take advantage of it to the point where you can't really double too much on Myles, because then you're worried about Graham. But getting back to the things that, is going to make the Browns defense successful, I think, part of it comes down to even the offense staying on the field a little longer. I saw the tweet from Warren Sharp basically saying that 70% of the Browns' drives last season ended on a punt or a turnover. That's way too high a number. And also because they were dead last in the NFL in scoring. I mean, that just means teams can kind of take the air out of the ball and run it more. And naturally, when you're running more, your pass rush doesn't nearly have as many opportunities to make plays, to get sacks and force those turnovers. So I think it comes down to, the idea of complementary football. Yeah, the defense took a step back in 2024. I don't think anybody thought it was going to play as well as it did in 2023. But I do think, just having a little more help on offense, just to take some pressure off of that defense, let them play a little more free, not feel like they have to hold teams to 10 or fewer points to have an opportunity to win. I just think that's going to be something that potentially helps this defense going forward.
So when you look at the defense, clearly it's the strength of the team because there are so many questions on the offensive side of the ball. What are you most concerned about defensively when you look at the Browns' defense?
I think it's the safety play. Right? Outside of Grant Delpit, you don't really know what you're going to get back there. Obviously, we saw Ronnie Hickman really make some contributions as a rookie, and the Browns haven't gone out and signed signed a big name safety. I know they got a couple of depth pieces, guys who could start, DeMonte Casey, Rayshon Jenkins. They got a UDFA and Donovan McMillan. But really, outside of Delpit, again, just not a lot of proven commodities. And this was a team that really lacked that true center field type deep safety who could patrol down the field, make sure nothing gets behind him, and allow Grant Delpit to play closer to the line of scrimmage and play more downhill football, which is where I think he is at his best. And if you have good safety play, can also help out the corners, who I do think also need to step up. Martin Emerson took that step back in 2024. Greg Newsome's on a contract year. You know what you're getting from Denzel Ward. Obviously, hopefully for the Browns, he can stay healthy. And if he misses a couple games, then Newsome and Emerson can kind of pick up the slack. And with that secondary in general is going to be a question mark for me. And particularly, like I said, when it comes to safety, someone is going to have to step up opposite Grant Delpit to really, provide some more cover deep down the field in that passing game.
So we know Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah will not be back this season. Still up in the air after this year, but won't play this year. Jim Schwartz was asked about how tough it is not to have JOK out there.
JOK was on his way to an all-pro season last year. He had really reached that level. We had talked this time last year about the biggest jump between being a starter and then being a Pro Bowl player. There's even a bigger jump to being an all-pro player. And it was really disappointing to lose him because he had, like you said, he had really hit his stride as a player. He'd had some sort of growing pains and some ups and downs, but he really fit the scheme well. He does fit the scheme well. His ability to blitz and rush the passer, and he made coverage look easy. He had just the game had slowed down for him, and so all those things together, it's disappointing to lose a player like that. But we support JOK and everything that he does, and he'll still have a big impact on our team this year.
So it's tough to replace a guy that was just coming into his own. And that's an area that's one of the reasons they likely drafted Carson Schlesinger. But they will miss Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah without question.
Yeah, there's no replacing a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. There's just not. I mean, he's been an impact player from the second he got to the NFL, from the time the Browns brought him in the second round. I mean, he's looked like one of the better linebackers in football, and it's truly unfortunate, just what happened with him. Obviously you would hope from a Browns perspective that he's able to play again, because when he is able to play and when he's able to play the way he has, I mean, you see a guy who is a true 3-down linebacker. Obviously the lack of size never really hurt him as far as having an impact on the field, able to make plays in the running and the passing game, getting after the quarterback, and those are things that you just can't replace. And obviously they clearly like Carson Schlesinger because, I mean, they took him at the 33rd pick. They could have had all kinds of trade offers to move off that pick. They stayed on that pick, and they just took him. So that tells you a lot about what they think of Carson Schlesinger. It would take a lot for him to live up to what JOK was, because, I mean, like Jim Schwartz was talking about, JOK might have had the potential to elevate himself to an all-pro player, and it's so difficult to replace those kind of guys. So obviously if Schlesinger can get to that level, I mean, that would be about as good as you can hope for, unless JOK can come back and be closer to what he was prior to his injury.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, there's a hypothetical trade situation out there with the Browns. We'll talk about that. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik on Sports4CLE. Browns play-by-play voice Andrew Siciliano about reading into the quarterback competition at this time of the year, and just a word of warning.
The reporting of what happens in OTAs breathlessly and somehow using that to determine on a show, which is what we're doing right now, understandably, somehow determining right now who's going to start week 1 is beyond foolish. Mm-hmm. It is so foolish. It is June 3rd. Yeah. Okay? It is June 3rd. Well, take the Browns, for example. They have a joint practice with the Eagles. They have a joint practice with the Panthers. They have 3 preseason games that this year truly do mean something. Truly do. Let it play out. They will each, those rookie quarterbacks, and Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco, they will each have a moments to shine.
Everybody's going to get their chance. And, it's kind of interesting. We haven't had a quarterback competition, if you will. So I think that's part of it. There's 4 guys. Everybody seems to have a favorite. That's part of it. There's so many different parts as to why everybody wants to know, well, who's going to be the quarterback of the Browns?
Well, it's not just a quarterback competition. I mean, it's a 4-man quarterback competition. I mean, usually we see it between 2 guys, maybe 3. I don't know how many times we've seen a 4-man quarterback competition. So, yeah, I think at this point, you're just trying to look for anything that kind of puts a clue out there of, who's going to be, who's in the lead, who's trailing, who's making up ground. And I think, like Andrew said, let's take it to training camp. Let's take it to padded practices. Let's take it into a preseason game or 2, or the joint practices to kind of see how it really stacks up. Because at this point, they're still trying to figure out, the scheme and getting quarterbacks getting adjusted to receivers, getting timing down and those sorts of things. That's kind of what this is, essentially. It's a suit-out passing camp going into mandatory minicamp in next week. So, yeah, it's way too early. I mean, again, we got to get into the grind of training camp. And, when that type of stuff gets going, when the practices keep ramping up, when, the physicality goes up with the pads, and of course, speaking back to the physicality that we talked about with adding Mason Graham and Carson Schwartz, that tells you that I would imagine this could be a more physical camp. And in those situations, when the pads come on and when that intensity ramps up, that's where I feel like the cream in the quarterback competition could start to rise up as far as who goes in and tries to win that job.
Yeah, and the one thing is there's, and I'm sure you hear it, I hear it all the time, people feeling like Shedor's not getting a fair chance, Kenny Pickett's not getting a fair chance, Dylan Gabriel's not getting a fair chance. However badly a fan thinks they want quarterback X to do well, Kevin Stefanski needs to find a quarterback. If he finds a quarterback, he has a job here for a long time making millions of dollars. He wants a quarterback more than any fan possibly could.
100%. I mean, his job is directly tied to whether or not, any of these quarterbacks, particularly one of the 2 they drafted, turns out to be successful. I mean, if you come out of the season, you find that Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders is your potential long-term starter. I mean, that gives you so much ability to go into the future and have the ability to really turn this franchise back around, back to where I think we all thought it was going to be when Baker Mayfield led the Browns to a playoff win in 2020. And certainly the goal, obviously, for any team is to win as many games as possible. Obviously, it's going to be difficult with the start of the season, but ultimately the coach has to weigh his starter on who, like you said at the beginning, who gives them the best chance to win in any particular game. And again, with the way the season's starting, with the way the schedule is lined up, I think that gives an advantage to the veterans, just because they need to kind of hit the ground running to really build, to show that 3-14 last season was an aberration, and that they're closer to a team that maybe doesn't make the playoffs, but closer to that team we saw in 2023 that did make it to the playoffs. So I think getting at least to that end of the spectrum, I think should be the goal, the ultimate goal. And Kevin Stefanski is going to be the guy who tries the hardest to find the quarterback that gets him there.
So one of those veterans, Kenny Pickett, Tommy Rees, talked about Kenny Pickett and what he's seen working with him so far.
Yeah, he's doing a really nice job. I think, the terminology in a system, those are fluid. Concepts usually are understood. Those are pretty universal at times. So Kenny's done a really nice job with everything we've asked him to do. We're pushing certain areas with him, continuing to try to improve his game. And, again, he's done a nice job through the first week and a half, and we expect him to continue to grow.
And again, it's kind of, I can't believe, Tim, every time I think about this, Kenny Pickett would be on his fourth, he'd still be on his rookie contract. So he's a guy that's played a lot of games, won games, hasn't had big numbers. You're not going to have big numbers with the offense that he worked in, though. I think in a perfect world, they would love for Kenny Pickett to outplay Joe Flacco and be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I do think, if the goal is obviously protecting the football, cutting down on turnovers, and leaning on your running game, I think Kenny Pickett is certainly the guy to go to. And he's played in two offenses in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia that really base their offenses around ball control. I mean, Pittsburgh, I've talked about so many times, the Tomlin formula involves protecting the football at all costs and not putting it in harm's way. And Kenny Pickett was pretty good at doing that. And in Philadelphia, when he had to start a couple games for an injured Jalen Hurts, he could just turn around and he had Saquon Barkley right there to get a whole bunch of yards whenever they needed. And he didn't have to put the ball in harm's way too many times, especially when you have some elite receivers like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith who can make any quarterback look much better. So certainly if you're going for that ball control style of offense, Kenny Pickett seems like an interesting fit. And it's crazy that a first-round pick kind of is in a weird situation where he's already on his third team. 2 years in Pittsburgh, last year in Philadelphia, and now in Cleveland. It's been quite an interesting journey for a guy who was drafted in the first round to already be on three teams before his rookie contract even expires.
All right, so this is from ESPN.com. It's hypothetical trade offers for Kirk Cousins. And this was the one they thought made the most sense. Falcons get Kenny Pickett, a 2026 sixth-round pick, cash considerations, which I believe they said was $10 million. Browns get Kirk Cousins and a 2026 seventh-round pick. I don't see that. That Kirk Cousins ship has sailed for the Browns. His name's Joe Flacco. And it doesn't cost him $10 million.
Yeah, I think if there was any hope that the Browns were going to trade for Kirk Cousins, I think that kind of left the second they drafted Dillon Gabriel, and it certainly disappeared completely if it hadn't already by the time they selected Shedeur Sanders. There's just no room on this roster for a fifth healthy quarterback in Kirk Cousins. And honestly, the way Atlanta's kind of handled this is a little bizarre. Michael Penix is their quarterback next season. You're keeping Kirk Cousins around, pretty much hoping that something's going to be open. But if Aaron Rodgers just signed with the Steelers, then you're left holding the bag of Kirk Cousins. You're paying a lot of money to him to be the backup to Michael Penix Jr., the guy you drafted 8th overall, the guy you gave the keys to at the end of last season. And you just have all this cap space that's just sitting there when you had chances in the offseason to try and unload some of that and get an asset for him and build your offense in your organization around Michael Penix Jr. and not having a Kirk Cousins distraction going on. It's just been a weird bit of asset management from a Falcons perspective.
All right, before I let you go, Jim Schwartz talks about what he thinks about Browns' first-round pick, Mason Graham.
Yeah, it's been an adjustment for him just because the style of play, reading blocks, and like you said, protecting linebackers and things like that. That's not what we do. We're a penetrating team that makes a big emphasis on defensive linemen being able to make the plays. So there has been some growing pains. He's pretty far ahead right now. When we get pads on, that'll be the next step, and then when you go live contact, that'll be a next step. So it'll be a process for him. I do think there's a lot of meat on the bone as far as his production. I don't know. I've had a lot of good defensive tackles over the years, and this scheme has featured a lot of those guys. It allows them to penetrate, play without handcuffs, and make some impacts. I think he can fall in to that category. We'll leave who he reminds us of when he starts playing and starts making plays.
And Tim, that's a little bit of a challenge to him. Go make some plays, but you can tell he has a plan for him, and that plan is based on some success he's had being Jim Schwartz.
When you look at some of the defensive tackles you worked with, obviously early in the show you had a soundbite where he talked about Fletcher Cox in Philadelphia. The big one, of course, from Jim Schwartz's time in Tennessee was Albert Haynesworth. Obviously he had that drama in Washington after he signed his contract. But before then, Albert Haynesworth was a really good defensive tackle. So you feel like Jim Schwartz has a pretty good understanding of the defensive tackle position and how to get the most out of guys. And I do think it's interesting that he talked about, Mason Graham playing in a more read and react style of defense at Michigan, which is last season, by the way, was under another former NFL defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale. So he's worked under guys who either are or were former NFL defensive coordinators. The are, of course, Jesse Minter, in 2022 and 2023. So Mason Graham certainly has all those athletic tools, and it's going to be interesting to see what he does in a scheme that's going to let him, essentially be turned loose in the middle of that defense. It's going to be fascinating. You see the relentless motor that Mason Graham plays with, the power he plays with. Certainly, I think he's got a chance, if he lives up to his billing, to rack up some pretty good numbers, in the early parts of his career.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out, Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns. So this is 2025 roster rankings from Pro Football Focus. They go Eagles 1, Ravens 2, Lions 3, 30th, Saints, Titans 31, and the Browns finished 32 dead last. Let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Dalton, take us through kind of how you arrived at those rankings and how the Browns end up at 32 in those.
Yeah. My co-host on the college football show there, and at times on the NFL show, myself and Max Chadwick, we came down to the Titans and the Browns for that bottom spot. And obviously, the Titans were the #1 overall team picking in the draft this past year, so certainly it would have made sense to put them as well. But the Browns, we really settled on the first factor being just the uncertainty on offense, right? It looks like a 4-horse race at quarterback between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett and 2 rookies. Might get 2 rookies rotating in at running back with Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. There's a lot of, as we've talked about before, there's a lot of uncertainty in that receiving core beyond Jerry Jeudy. The offensive line is going to have 4 players that are going to be 30 years old by the time the season starts. They dealt with a lot of injuries last year. So that was a big factor, along with maybe, some poor performance in the secondary last year and not much depth behind Myles Garrett on the defensive line. But the first biggest factor that went into that was the lack of certainty from a lot of different positions on offense.
The other thing is they're going to rely, in theory, on a number of rookies to start. And now if those rookies play the way the Browns grade them to, they could end up being a pretty good team. If they don't, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Right, and that's the part where it feels like this is a developmental year, and you do feel like there's some guys who we know they're gonna try to make long-term pieces, right? I think about Quinshon Judkins at running back as a second-round pick, Carson Schlesinger at linebacker as a second-round pick, Mason Graham as the 5th overall pick in the draft, and obviously trading down to get an extra first-rounder next year. So those are guys you're really hoping become starters. And then again, you have the quarterback situation. I would say honestly, Dave, the hardest part of doing these roster rankings is how much you weigh a team's quarterback situation compared to the rest of its roster, right? And that's the problem with this Browns team is they have the most wide open quarterback situation in the league with 2 veterans who really probably shouldn't be starting at this stage of their careers, and then 2 rookies who were taken in the 3rd and 5th round. So the uncertainty there, and then you're right, the amount of young players that are going to be playing significant snaps really makes it, it gives a team a high level of variance. Maybe it does work out well and those young guys step up, but it's hard to tell that that's going to happen during the preseason.
So the other thing you did is a bounce back candidate for all 32 teams. For the Browns, you went with Greg Newsome, the cornerback. What do you like about that? How do you think that works out?
Yeah, I think you could see a bounce back coming because so often it's just about a guy not playing up to his track record, right? And Newsome, his first 3 years in the league, bouncing inside in the slot and a little bit outside too. But for us in our coverage grades, hovered around a 70 in his first 3 seasons, which is pretty good. That's like a solid starter kind of mark there. Whereas last year dropped down to 54. His season ended prematurely with the hamstring injury. It's just a matter of we've seen him play better football. Maybe he just needs to play exclusively in the slot more often. But that's a guy with a track record from his first 3 years as a pretty solid starter that I would expect to get back to it as long as he's healthy this season.
So another one that you did is one impact offseason acquisition for every NFL team. And you went with the guy that they took 5th overall, Mason Graham. The key metric, 88.3 pass rush grade since 2023, 7th best for defensive tackles in major college football. Let's talk a little bit about Graham. Graham, and we just heard in the segment previous, Jim Schwartz talking about in his system he's had a bunch of guys, and he didn't go as far as saying Graham fits that mold, but he did say there was meat on the bone for his production. How much do you like Mason Graham in a Jim Schwartz system?
I like it a lot, especially when you consider, look, somebody here is going to get one-on-one matchups between Myles Garrett and Mason Graham, and Graham being the younger guy and Garrett having his reputation, it's probably going to be Mason Graham getting a lot of those one-on-one matchups. You mentioned it there, 7th best pass rusher from the inside in college football over the last 2 years, and last year he was the best run defender in college football. So he's a true 3-down talent who can move all over the line of scrimmage. There's even times at Michigan when he was standing up off the edge in a 2-point stance and still making things happen. And the meat on the bone that Jim Schwartz is talking about is the fact that he just didn't have a whole lot of sacks, and that's because when teams were playing Michigan and their great defensive line last year, they were getting rid of the ball so quickly that Mason Graham just didn't really have a chance to finish plays with sacks because they knew if they didn't get rid of the football, they were going to get their quarterback killed. So, look, I think Graham was well worthy of that 5th overall pick. I honestly thought Jacksonville was going to stay at that 5th pick and take him there, just kind of flip the other way with him and Travis Hunter. Yeah, so I know Travis Hunter is going to be the focus of that trade and what the outcome is there, but they got an extremely talented football player in Mason Graham as well.
So for a number of years, the Browns have looked at trying to find a bookend for Myles Garrett, someone to play opposite him. Same philosophy. Is it more effective to find a guy that plays next to him?
I don't know that it's more effective, but I do think it balances out your football team even more, especially when you have a guy who can play in run defense as well as Mason Graham can, right? And then you're talking about, okay, well, which way do we slide protection? So I think the principle can be a lot the same because then, there's times when you have a team, say, like the Dallas Cowboys lately, who sometimes they have a great room full of edge defenders, but they're a little bit soft on the inside. They'll get beat in the run game. So, look, every spot I think is equally important, but to get a guy like Graham in there who's a 3-down threat, who's an elite run defender and can help you all over the place in the pass rush. And I'm telling you, he can do, we saw in Michigan in the same way that, say, Chris Jones does for the Kansas City Chiefs. He can line up all over the place. You might even see him on 3rd downs and things like that, get out on the edge and act as that bookend as well.
All right, before I let you go, wrote another article, every team's Achilles heel. So the highest graded player against each team. For the Bengals, it was Myles Garrett. Browns, it was Josh Hines-Allen. Cowboys, Wyatt Teller. Take us through some of those things, it's kind of fascinating. Wyatt Teller and the Cowboys is interesting.
Yeah, I could start there for you. And look, the Cowboys have struggled in run defense the last couple of years. And I did this going back 5 years back to 2020. The Browns have played the Cowboys twice. And the first time, especially, Teller actually had the highest graded game of his entire career, just mauling the Cowboys on the inside. And even last year in a loss, played pretty well. So the run blocking ability of Wyatt Teller really is a problem. And that was a problem for the Dallas Cowboys against a lot of teams over the last few years, especially this past year. As far as the Browns go, and you talk about Josh Hines-Allen, they played Jacksonville a couple of times recently. He just absolutely dominated them. I mean, I know there's sometimes you're looking for more of those guys in the division. Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Joe Burrow? But when I found the highest graded player was Josh Hines-Allen the couple of times that they played him. And then when you talk about in division, I think every Bengals fan here in Cincinnati is not surprised by this. Myles Garrett dominates the Bengals every single time he plays them, whether the Browns are win or lose or draw. Myles Garrett, the Bengals have no answer for him on their offensive line.
Dalton Wasserman, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate it as always, Dave. Thank you.
Dalton Wasserman, make sure you check him out, Pro Football Focus. He's a data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter from Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, 10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Let's begin by heading to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, love the show. Big fan. Anyways, been trying to keep up with the Cavs, what they're doing after getting beat by the Pacers. Been reading that the Lakers are interested in Jared Allen. Please don't tell me that the Cavs are the only team to make a trade to the Lakers. The Lakers don't have anything anybody wants or could use. If that was the case, they wouldn't be trying to get rid of them. They don't have any draft picks for the next probably 6 or 7 years. So why in the world would the Cavs try to make a trade with the Lakers? Please tell me this is just rumors and that there's no validity to this. So I just want to hear your thoughts. Go Cavs, go Browns. Ooh, ooh.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. So, Chris, any truth to the? I mean, the Lakers may want Jared Allen. Is there any thought that the Cavs are talking to the Lakers about Jared Allen?
I think, Dave, they're in a situation where they're evaluating their roster and they're trying to determine, are they a better basketball team with or without Jared Allen? Are they a better basketball team with or without Darius Garland? And what kinds of packages could be out there to make us a better team? I don't sense that they're completely closed off to the idea of potentially moving Jarrett, but everything depends on what they get back in return and whether they think that package is going to improve their championship chances.
So another one that has been out there, and I think you were the one that actually brought this up, Darius Garland to the Magic for Jalen Suggs, Tristan da Silva. And fans are looking at it going, Garland is better than Suggs. Take us through kind of that.
Yeah, the reason that I brought it up is because, Dave, the Cavs lost in the first time where they have to actually like look at themselves in the mirror. And that's the kind of situation that they're in this offseason. 2 years ago, they lost to the Knicks, and they could simply say, our roster wasn't ready. A lot of our young guys weren't ready. We were ahead of schedule in terms of our organizational trajectory. So it's understandable that we got blown out in that series by New York. We just weren't ready. It was too early for us. Then last year, you had all the different injuries that they were dealing with. Jared Allen for the final 8 games of the playoffs, Donovan Mitchell for the final 2 games of the Boston series. Even before that, Donovan was kind of dragging his leg around, playing at less than 100%. And after that loss against Boston, not only could they sit there and say, well, we weren't fully healthy, so we didn't get our best shot to give Boston our best shot, but they could have said exactly what they did. We had a coaching problem. We had enough talent here, but we needed somebody else to bring out the best in that talent. What's it look like in a different system, with a different coach, with different philosophies, and with a different voice? This year is a different kind of loss for the team. There just aren't as many qualifiers attached to this one, right? There aren't as many excuses attached to this one. Sure, there's obviously Evan Mobley being at less than 100% after he sprained his ankle. Darius Garland limping all around the floor. But I just don't think there are enough people inside the organization, Dave, that feel like even if the Cavs were at full strength, that the outcome of that series would have gone in their favor. I think this is the first time that they actually lost a playoff series where they're looking at it saying, what do we have to do different as an organization? How do we have to become a better playoff level basketball team? Yeah, we've mastered the 82-game regular season, but what can we do to be better equipped in the 16-game season? And one of the options for them, if they want to explore an option, is reconfiguring the roster, reimagining the offense, and resetting their salary cap situation. And moving on from Darius Garland allows them to accomplish all 3 of those things. I'm not saying that they're going to, but I'm saying when they're looking at all of their avenues to improvement, that one specifically with Darius accomplishes all 3 of those things that they could potentially feel like would make them a better basketball team. And the whole idea behind the Jalen Suggs thing, and the reason that I brought it up, is Orlando, it's no secret, they want a point guard. They're going to be involved in every conversation, trade, free agency, for any point guard with a pulse. They need somebody that can organize their offense. They need somebody that can help them score the basketball. They have a hard time scoring 100 in today's day and age. That's really, really difficult. They need somebody to create easier shots for Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner and some of those other guys on that roster. So they have a need there. And the Cavs need to get tougher. They need to get more defensive minded. I mean, if you think about that series against Indiana, the primary problem that the Cavs had is they had no answers defensively for the Pacers' offensive machine. And the Cavs said that they were a defense-first team. And the Cavs said that they were going to be this team that was going to lean on their defense and allow that to be their identity and their backbone. Of the 8 teams that played in the conference semifinals, no team had a worse defense in that particular round than the Cavs. So if you take Darius Garland out of the equation and you replace him with Jalen Suggs, yeah, you lose playmaking. Yeah, you lose shooting. Yeah, you lose scoring. But you increase your chances of thriving in a playoff environment on the defensive end of the floor against teams like the Knicks, against teams like the Celtics, against teams like the Indiana Pacers. You increase your chances at that end of the floor exponentially by taking Darius out of the equation and replacing him with an elite on-ball, feisty perimeter defender like Jalen Suggs.
Is there a time frame if they go into like July 1st? Does that they get into the second apron and then it becomes a little more difficult? Things have to match up better.
I mean, everything that they have that they could consider doing, Dave, this offseason is going to be complicated because of the realities of where they are with their salary cap. Because of the restrictions that come with being a second apron team, because of the luxury tax, the bill that Dan Gilbert is going to have to pay at some point. They have 4 high-priced players on this roster. It's Donovan Mitchell, it's Evan Mobley, it's Darius Garland, it's Jared Allen. And a majority of those guys are taking up the bulk of their salary. So the problems that they potentially run into when it comes to moves is all external. Internally, they can do the things that they want to do. If they want to re-sign Sam Merrill, they can do it. There aren't any penalties attached to that except for just paying a luxury tax bill. Because if you're a second apron team, the penalties and the restrictions come when you're trying to make moves outside the organization. So it just requires the Cavs to be a little bit more creative. It may require the Cavs, if they go down the route of trading one of these guys, and I'm not saying that they're going to, but if they go down that route, they might need a third team. They might need a fourth team, because a lot of those things that come with being a second apron team, a lot of those things are really, really complicated, and they really restrict some of the movement that you're able to make as a team that is in the second apron.
So we heard earlier in the show that Cavs assistant Jordan Ott was named new head coach of the Phoenix Suns earlier today. This is a list from Bovada USA of the head coaching candidates and the odds to replace Tom Thibodeau, who was fired yesterday. Johnny Bryant, Cavs assistant, is top on that list. They have Kenny Atkinson second, and Michael Malone is not on this. So I preface it like that. So two things with this. One, tell me Kenny Atkinson is not going to be the next head coach of the New York Knicks. And two, what does it say about the organization that two finalists for the Suns job were their assistant coaches, Ott and Johnny Bryant, and Bryant is probably going to be one of the leading candidates for the Knicks job?
It tells you that people around the NBA, Dave, are paying attention. Kenny Atkinson built a really good coaching staff here in Cleveland. Yes, he was coach of the year because he's really, really smart, and he had a great season as a head coach. But he also surrounded himself with really smart people, with guys that are ready to become head coaches at some point soon. Jordan Ott, Phoenix believes, is ready right now. Phoenix believed enough in Johnny Bryant to make him a finalist. I do believe that Johnny is going to get consideration from the Knicks as well, because he's a really good coach. And when you surround yourself with smart, good people, you're going to have a chance to thrive. And that's what Kenny built here in Cleveland. So the 64-18 record, it's a little bit Kenny Atkinson, it's a little bit of the front office, it's a little bit of the roster, it's a little bit of the assistants. And when you have a team that is as successful as the Cavs were in the regular season, look, Dave, we cannot overlook, just because they lost 4-1 against the Indiana Pacers, we can't overlook the fact that they won 64 games, the second most ever in franchise history. We can't overlook the fact that they had the 16th best point differential ever in NBA history. We can't overlook the fact that they had one of the best offenses in NBA history. We can't overlook the fact that they were one of 4 teams in the NBA that were top 10 in offense and defense during the regular season. So there are a lot of things that they did well when it came to the 82-game season, and I think teams around the NBA were paying attention to that. And they said, hey, we want a piece of that. Hey, we want guys who were responsible, or at least partially responsible, for that level of regular season success. And when you do have success the way that the Cavs did in the regular season, yeah, teams are going to pay attention. They're going to say, hey, are some of your players available in a trade? Hey, are some of your coaches available to be our next head coach or an assistant coach in a different, more expansive role than what he has currently in Cleveland? So with success comes notoriety. And with notoriety comes what you're seeing right now, Phoenix saying Jordan Ott's a really, really good candidate for him to do some of the things that Kenny Atkinson maybe was able to do for the Cavs. Let's go that direction. Maybe the Knicks say Johnny Bryant's the same kind of guy. But that's what comes with being a successful organization. And for all of the stumbles that the Cavs had in the playoffs against Indiana, there's a reason why going into next year, odds makers think they are once again one of the title favorites.
Chris Fedor, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Chris.
You got it, Dave. Anytime, man.
Chris Fedor, make sure you check him out. Great Cavs coverage for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.